Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Stellar Open Protocol discussion. As per usual, in these meetings, we discuss potential changes to the Stellar Protocol that take the form of Core Advancement Proposals, or CAPs. These are technical specs. They suggest changes to the Stellar Protocol that allow the Stellar Protocol to add new features and evolve to meet the needs of the ecosystem. We're live streaming them so that anyone who's out there can follow along. But again, I do want to point out it's technical. So if you are watching this, you should probably look at CAP 21 in order to understand what we're talking about. That is what we're going to be talking about today, CAP 21. And you should also join the Stellar Dev mailing list where offline discussions about these changes take place. Also, we do keep an eye on the discussion box, so if you put comments or questions in there, they do help inform our decisions going forward. We may not actually address them in this meeting, although if they're super germane, I may bring them up. Today, we are focusing specifically, as I said, on CAP 21. CAP 21 basically is a cap that lays the groundwork for building payment channels on Stellar. So if what we're talking about today sounds a little obscure, keep that in mind. Payment channels are things that allow multiple parties to securely transact off-chain and periodically settle on-chain. And among other things, they make it easier to build high volume use cases on Stellar. So changes to CAP 21 are proposed by CAP 21. They allow for payment channels. Last time we also discussed CAP 40 and basically got it to a point where it was near ready to be accepted, but CAP 40 is contingent on CAP 21. And so here's where we are with CAP 21. There are a few outstanding issues and questions that we're going to try to walk through today. I think that we are actually quite close to getting this accepted, although we'll see what the outcome of today's conversation is. So with that in mind, let's just kick it off. CAP 21 is what we are talking about today. And I believe that, the question is, I think that there are a couple of questions that came up on the mailing list, and there was a question about transactions failing during execution that came up during the last meeting. But to start with, I think we should sort of try to deal with the outstanding questions that are on the mailing list. And Nico, if you can, just share the first of those questions with us so that we can start to discuss it. Nico.
You're muted.
I was looking, I didn't have those questions open. Hold on.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
So I guess like the first question was more of a minor thing that we didn't discuss, but that maybe is something we should be at least putting as like a potential thing. That is, should that behavior that we have for tracking the modify time, basically for the sequence number, be an opt-in. Right now, it's kind of making this blanket change, right? Like as soon as protocol, whatever, as soon as CAP 21 basically becomes active, we're going to kind of, make, like track this new last modified basically in each account.
I mean, it seems like
like from an implementation point of view, I mean, the reason I mentioned that as a flag, right, instead of like being like a protocol base, right? Like in terms of the code, it's actually the same thing. Like you have to, in the code, to deal with old protocol version, new protocol version. So instead of checking against protocol version, we could check against the flag. The difference is that it would make it that the tests for sure are going to be much simpler, because now we can actually just test that part like in isolation fairly easily. Whereas I know that Lee in the past raised the issue, and I think that's true, that we would have to rework a bunch of tests given the way they are written today. In core, at least. I don't know in outside.
I mean, it seems like a pretty big foot gun to have this flag, right? Because now this is something that's going to like catastrophically break all kinds of, smart contracts and stuff if like this flag ever gets cleared, or if like people don't realize that it's not set. So there would have to be like a huge advantage to having these like two kinds of accounts, one that just blanket fail preconditions and ones that actually implement the preconditions.
No, it would not. So the preconditions would not fail. It's the last modified, would not be enabled. Yeah, so I don't know if it's yeah, like preconditions. I think that the cap says that if the, if you take
the last modified isn't
like,
there, it's treated as 0.
Yeah, it's exactly, it would be 0. So I don't know
So
if
I think if you added the flag, we could actually, we don't need to have a default at all. We just say that a transaction is invalid if it tries to use that feature and the account doesn't have it enabled. And for any account to enable the feature,
like the new stack with
that's a huge foot gun, right? Now you have to like constantly check that that when you're engaging in a protocol that looks like it's okay, that account actually has this flag set. So I'm really, I don't understand what benefit could possibly outweigh the cost.
Like I was saying, it's a faster implementation. So I would just wanted to mention it because I know that was raised before, and by looking at the first kind of round of questions on that Lee had on that prototype, I mean, it looks like it's a legitimate concern. I mean,
so maybe can you explain a little bit better, like what the complication is of having it?
I think it's that it's around the setup, I think, of test code. Like a lot of times we're creating accounts, we're doing all those things. And I think those accounts are created
without account entry extensions.
Well, with the default change like that, they would be created with this extension. And then when we do so basically we create like a snapshot of the ledger, right? And then we run a bunch of tests for different protocol versions. And here the protocol version is obviously like for older protocol versions, this would be invalid, an invalid ledger state. So I think there's a bunch of refactoring that needs to be done. I mean,
what would be an invalid ledger state?
Well, an account with such an extension is not valid as of today, right?
So, I mean, what happened when you upgraded to account entry extension v2? Why is this any different from the v1 to v2?
v1 to v2 was an opt-in, right? Like it was only when we're using, I don't remember, v1 to v2 had liabilities, right? So that's what when you...
yes,
when the account was
number sponsored and number sponsoring, not sponsors.
Yeah. Otherwise, we didn't change it. We would not touch it.
Can I clarify something here? Is the way that the proposal is currently written, I think what I'm understanding is that when an account is created, it'll automatically have an account entry extension v3 at that point. There's no way otherwise, right? And yeah, so basically like the reason that this will be confusing, David, is that like there's like old historical tests, which is a lot of the tests, like many thousands, possibly tens of thousands of tests, were written in such a way that like the setup was done in the current protocol version, and then you like time travel backwards in time and do the test in the appropriate protocol version. So we'd have to go and fix that. Yeah.
So you're saying that right now, if I create a new, you're saying that right now, if I create a new account, I don't get an account entry extension v2.
Correct. You just have null extension. Now, maybe there's an argument that we should go and fix our tests anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I was saying, like, it's a trade-off, right? Like,
can I write you like an XDR converter that will automatically? I mean, it seems like we could. I mean, do the tests have like specific like SHA-256 hash values of ledger state? Is that the problem? Well, they can't though, because there's other values like the ledger number and stuff that aren't there. So what specifically is it that fails in the test? Like maybe there's just like an XDR, there's like some template magic.
Well, it's an invalid XDR as of currently.
So if we can just write an unmarshalling function that will unmarshal a new account entry to an old one by stripping off the entry extensions v2 and 3, then we're good, right? All we need is that one function.
No, not really. Like, I mean, yes, you could in principle do that, but like in practice, what's happening is like we have these like invariants that are written, right? Like they check that like nothing is broken. Things only exist if they should exist in effect, like no negative balances, blah blah blah. And in practice, like you can imagine the sequence of operations is like You're in protocol version 19, let's say, or 20 or whatever, whenever we get this done. You create an account. It has this account entry extension v3. You travel back in time. You go and do some other operation. You know, you're not doing like raw XDR operations. It's like literally a Stellar operation. So let's call it like a payment. It goes and does this payment. It loads up this thing. It loads it happily because it knows how to load it. It's valid XDR in the terms of like what the XDR definition.
Wait, sorry, but it is marshaled or it's unmarshaled? You're loading up the bytes, or you just have a C++ structure floating around?
You're loading up the literal bytes.
Okay.
But like this is happening like deep inside of Stellar Core, like not in the test. It's like, you know, in the actual production code. Then you like load this thing up. It's happy because it's good. You go through, you do the operation, everything is fine, and then you hit the invariant, and the invariant's like, oh no, you're dead because you have this thing that shouldn't have been there. The right solution is just to fix the test so that they do the setup in the right version.
Do you realize you guys are like massively making the case that I was making several weeks ago that like we shouldn't be doing our extensions this way, right? Because like if there's any benefit to doing this horrible cascading nested thing that's wasteful of bytes, wasteful of like programmer keystrokes, and wasteful of your right-hand margin, it should be that like this backwards compatibility stuff isn't an issue. But like
no, but David, this is not in production. This doesn't matter. Like this is invalid. This is an invalid byte configuration in existing protocol version. That's what John just said. We have invariants that check that you don't have garbage in the ledger.
Right.
That's garbage. Like from today's point of view, it's garbage, right?
Sure.
It's not valid.
But I'm saying the extension.
It has nothing to do with how extensions are set up, right?
But it should. I mean, shouldn't that be one of the benefits of doing these cascaded XDRs? Is this backwards compatibility with source code?
No, it's not backward compatible. That's the point. Like this is garbage from today's protocol version.
No. I'm just saying, like, this is. We have to rewrite the test for this, but we would also have had to rewrite the tests if we'd done it the original way that I did the extension. So I don't see what we've won by this latest change that I made. Because of the last
nothing to do written wrong in the first place, but the production code doesn't have to change at all. The production code all just works exactly the same. That's the
let's see. Well, whatever. Okay, so we have to rewrite a bunch of tests.
The issue here is just tests, right? Like in the production code, the way that it works as proposed is good. It prevents there from being like a foot gun, but it requires us to rewrite a bunch of tests. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, like the reason, going back to the question I was asking, right? The reason I was asking the question was to see how bad would it be if we were making this a flag, right? That's the question.
Yeah.
And David, it seems like it's a bad, yeah, it would be really bad. So that means we need to go fix the test. I mean, that's kind of what, you know.
Okay.
Cool.
Fixing tests is easy. It just takes time. Like we just need.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a bit of a time sink, but that's okay. I mean, if we are saying it's basically a non-starter to have a flag.
It takes time or it takes XDR trickery, right? So maybe like offline.
No. The XDR trickery is going to be violation of the protocol. That's why we can't do that. So let's that's fine. Let's take it offline. Regardless, it's test hackery, right? So
yeah.
I want to just mention one thing about like if we were to introduce a flag, I think it would have an impact on the usability of this stuff as well, because like you're saying, like we would never be able to just create a transaction for an existing account that hadn't enabled the flag, which means that if you have an account that's just sitting there on the network and you want to interact with it in this way with some new contract that maybe doesn't require interactive setup initially, you can't just go and use these features of the network, which is sort of inconvenient. Like, so that won't affect the payment channel protocol that we're hoping to use this for right now, but it might affect some other future thing.
Yeah, and it's worse than that because we don't have SPV. So like there's no concise proof that an account actually has this flag. So it means that the receiver side would like synchronously need to like query some trusted Horizon instance in order to like participate in what should be an offline protocol. So
no flags, fix the tests.
Yeah, it's a bummer for the tests, but
okay, what was the second question?
Time point. This one should be a lot easier.
Yeah, the unsigned thing. So my question was like, I don't remember what happened there, but like making that change is there's actually not a lot of, like the mention in the backward compat section is actually a bit misleading. It says that, nobody cares. I'm actually not true. I mean, it's also not so sure. I'm pretty sure we do have in historical data transactions with large max time. And the other thing too is that today's code, regardless, core, Horizon, SDKs, they have to handle those large numbers. So in a way, like making that change just makes everything more complicated. So I'm not sure it's
I'm
actually
delighted to leave it unsigned. I originally had it unsigned, and then I feel like people objected to that. I mean, all I want is I think all our time points should be like a type def, right? So it's like the only thing worse that, I think either signed or unsigned is fine. It's just, it's bad to have like a mix of the two, right? Like we should just be consistent about signed and unsigned, because when you start comparing signed and unsigned numbers, as we all know, bad things start happening. So
it's already a type
we
def
already
today,
have,
right?
we already have a mix. Claimable balances use signed, time bounds use unsigned. I mean, we're there, so.
Oh, yeah, okay. So I guess you're out of luck on this one.
So, I mean, I really don't care. I just want to be the same as other things. So I guess I'll keep it unsigned, and we can add
regular transactions. That's kind of the concern I have here, is that it changes regular transactions.
Yeah. So I'll make it unsigned again. We'll make time point unsigned, and we'll deprecate signed time points in future operations.
Another option would be to make the time point inside the new precondition version 2, signed. Since that's a new field, nobody's going to be using that yet. We keep the old time point as unsigned for backwards compatibility.
It seems not worth it to me, but yeah.
Let's keep it unsigned.
Okay, sounds good.
Great, so time points remain unsigned. What do we got next?
Next one is around the section on how transactions get forwarded. Basically says that there are like those two criteria, A and B, that allows a node to decide if it's going to accumulate basically this transaction in its queues. And so like the first question is that, so I think that the criteria B talks about lower signums. It's actually not clear. It seems to imply that you're actually allowing transactions to be accumulated if we receive them out of order, and I think this is probably not the intent. That's the first question.
Oh, so in other words, I say don't forward it, but it should be stronger than that. It should be just like throw it away.
Well, it should, like it should not be valid.
Okay,
I mean,
that's a good point.
Right, B is actually it shouldn't have this lower sequence number, I think, on the.
Does that make sense?
Wait, what do you mean there shouldn't be? Now
Like right now, you're saying it's invalid if either the condition is not met. So this is
right.
Those are easy, right? The B is what I'm interested in. Like right now, it says it's invalid if there is already a transaction with a lower signum.
Sorry, it's invalid. No, is valid.
That's what your text says.
Did I just miss the polarity? A transaction with a non-zero min-seq age or min-seq ledger must be treated as invalid and not forwarded if either A, the appropriate condition doesn't hold, or B, there are pending valid transactions with lower sequence numbers on the same source account. Okay, so wait, so what's, and you're saying B, I should say, and in case B, you should also throw it away instead of storing it in memory?
Well, it's invalid, right? So we are throwing it away. The question
it's
is
not.
like,
No, it's not invalid. It's not invalid.
Well, that's
B,
what
so in
the
A, it's
paragraph
invalid. In B,
says.
it's valid, but there are things with a lower sequence number. So let me give you an example, just to make sure we're on the same page, right? So you have a transaction with sequence number 2, but that could execute immediately because it has like a min seq num of that's less than the default, and you have a transaction with sequence number 1. Right, so you could just execute 2 in isolation, or you could execute 1, but you can't execute them both in the same ledger.
No, that I understand. Yes, but here, so if you receive, so in your example, I have 2, right? I have 2, and then I receive 1. What happens?
Then 1 takes priority. Like
Okay, so then it makes so then this is kind of broken, right? Like it's actually underspecified, first of all. Right?
Why is it underspecified?
Well, you're actually not saying that. You're talking about. Well, I guess it. So yeah, you're saying you're kicking out higher transactions with higher signum.
That's right. Like you'll still vote for a block. You'll still nominate a block that has it. But
is that a good property? I mean, it sounds kind of weird.
We already have this. We already have this exact situation.
No, we don't kick out transactions like this.
Okay, let me tell you a situation I believe is exactly analogous, which is that you receive a transaction with a fee of 100, and then you receive another transaction with the same sequence number that has like a fee of 200, right? And so now, if you've already, of course, forwarded the 100, well, you forwarded it, fine, but now you'll forward the 200, and if you see both, you'll only forward the one with the higher fee. And so that's the same way. We're basically like among multiple mutually exclusive but valid transactions, you need a way to prioritize them. And I'm saying here you prioritize the one with the lower sequence number.
But why do you need this constraint?
What constraint? You have 2 transactions.
But why the lower one is more important?
Oh, because the second one could later be valid, right? Unlike the case of the sequence numbers, you're not necessarily completely invalidating the second transaction. It'll have to execute like an hour later or whatever the min seq age is. So or min whatever the yeah. So so you might as well like keep the most number of transactions valid. I mean, if you are strongly opposed to this, I guess it doesn't really matter. We could favor the other one, but I don't see.
I mean, it sounds like kind of arbitrary, so that's why I'm asking like why the first one shouldn't win in this case.
In some ways, it might be more useful if the second one could win, because we often say that sequence numbers is how you invalidate prior transactions. So it sounds like if we say that the first one wins, then you could never use a higher sequence number transaction with a min sequence number that was lower to invalidate a prior transaction.
You can
always submit it, but someone could always.
Well, they might not be able to submit it because they might not. It might have a timeout. It might have a min time, right? I mean, which is generally how this works. So like the reason I did this is because like it seems more useful to have like if you have 2 transactions, then they can both execute. It seems helpful to have it be such that both can execute. And if you accidentally send out the second transaction too soon, like
yeah, I mean, like I understand.
I don't strongly care. I don't strongly care. If you want it the other way around, I can do it the other way around.
It has some implication, right, from a DOS point of view, because you can basically like, if you have this rule, right, where you don't say first one wins, you basically can So with
So
the fee
this will
example,
connect more. This will collect more fees, right? The
No.
current draft will
No.
collect fees on both transactions.
No, you're dropping no, let me finish. So with the example you said it's the same thing when with the fee you have to actually outbid, right? So you have to constantly, like if you want to cancel a pending transaction, you have to outbid it, right? With this one, you don't have to outbid it. It can be the same fee. And you can do that.
Canceling it.
No, you are. You said that transaction that was in the transaction queue gets discarded because I have a lower sequence number of transactions.
I'm not currently discarding it. I thought that's what you were suggesting. Currently, you're just not forwarding it.
So just to be clear, David, what you're suggesting is like, imagine that I have current seek numbers 10, I submit a transaction with min seek 10, actual seek 12, and then I later receive seek 11. Your approach that what we think is in the cap, and I've been rereading it like 5 times here while everybody's been talking to make sure I think that's what actually it says, is that you would actually keep both in that case. Or would you only keep?
Because you don't know, like you could see a block that has either one. It's the same way, like if you see I think it's very similar to the multiple prices, to the multiple fees, right? Where it's like, you saw the fee of 100, then you see this fee of 200, so you forward that as well, and you still need to kind of keep the fee of 100 around because it could be that the block that gets nominated has that. So you don't want to, like, if you see a hash of that transaction, you still will need to, like, get the pre-image of it, right?
We actually jumped that transaction.
So you might actually have to then go fetch it from another Stellar Core.
Potentially, but the other thing.
Okay, we can do that.
The other thing, though, is that with the fees back off exponentially. That's a big difference against this. And I think that's what Nico was saying. Like, I forget what multiplier we use. I forget if we ended up using 2 or 10. We debated about it for a long time. But either way, it's like you can only do this 64 times with fees, or maybe it's 10 times or 20 times. With the scenario that I've been trying to think about while I was rereading your thing repeatedly is like, what if I have 2 transactions and they can't both execute because of fees? I don't have enough balance to pay both fees. But so, like, going back to my scenario, you're at seek 10, you have min seek 10, seek 12, then you receive 11. The fees make the 2 transactions mutually exclusive. Which one do I take? Because then I do end up throwing out the future one if I take the other one. And how do you implement this? And what's the right thing to do? Like, it's not obvious in that case if the fees make it mutually exclusive. So, like, the implementation is actually harder in that case too.
So hold on. This seems no different from today. So forget the min seek num, right? Suppose that I put out transactions, with sequence numbers 11 and 12. Like right now they'll both be forwarded, but what if there's not enough fee for 12? Well, then you would throw that out, I guess, right?
But I wouldn't have even accepted 12.
Because you kind of, so you're in the so for pending transactions, you're sort of keeping track of the cumulative fee that's been charged.
I'd have to go and check how we do this for fee bumps. I don't remember if we reject the fee bump, if you wouldn't have the fee to pay for all the subsequent transactions, or if we
yeah, it's the same thing. We have to, basically, you have to, whatever is in the queue, you have to be able to pay for the fees.
Are you sure that's what we implemented? I'm not positive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh no, it's yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, so then that would make this a little bit trickier, David, where it's like then you have to handle the case of like, oh, like I have this earlier transaction, but I don't have the fee for it. We should make it symmetric against the fee bump case, I guess. Yeah.
So wait, so you're saying that the fee bump, the outer transaction doesn't have enough to pay, or sorry, what's your
yeah, the outer, like, it doesn't really matter.
I have both a normal transaction and a fee bump transaction that I'm paying for on a different account. You're saying, and now you have to like prioritize one or the other.
Does it even have to be on a different account? I think it could even work on the same account. On different accounts, it definitely works like this. If you don't have the balance on the other account, then we'll just reject you.
Well, no, but there's different sequence numbers. So I can issue like fee bumps on like 3 different transactions on 3 different source accounts, right?
Yeah.
And if I can only pay for 2 out of those 3, then like different validators are going to forward potentially like different subsets of these 3 transactions,
Correct.
right? So this seems like a very similar situation. So I don't know why.
No, it's not. It is similar if you. That's what I was teasing out, right? Like what you described in the. So imagine your min is like 1. You know, it's like whatever. It doesn't matter. Basically, it's set, but it's 1. And and now you're at, like you get first transaction, sequence number 10. Then you get the second transaction, sequence number 11. That's what you actually described here. You're dealing with that case. That is 11 in this case, you will consider it invalid because, for now, right? Because you have 10 and you can't process it in the same block. So in this case, you just discard 11, everything is good. 11 basically can be resubmitted later, all right? Now consider this in the other direction. I'm receiving 11. And right now, you're saying that 10 is valid. So if 10 is valid, I need to discard 11. That's the difference here, is that you're discarding things from the queue. So you basically can have a situation where, now take this to 1,000. I'm going to flood T1000. Then, and I'm going to basically submit to the network 9, like 1 less every time. And those are all going to get forwarded. They're all getting flooded. And at the end, only 1 gets actually in the queue, which is the smaller one. So I use all this capacity on the overlay, right? With no repercussion, fee-wise.
Okay, and this would be fixed if we pick the highest sequence number.
If we pick, no, you don't. So highest has the same problem, right? It's what you want to do is the first one wins, I think.
Independent of the sequence number, the first transaction.
You don't care.
Yeah, that's
like
easy.
Basically, you don't care. Like if there's the first one that's in the queue, then if the second one arrives, it says, oh, there is already something with a condition like that.
Yeah. So the like can totally do that. The downside now is that you're more likely to get conflicting nominations if there's more than 1 leader.
Yeah, but that's fine. It's actually better from a flooding point of view. The network is going to be much more resilient at this point.
And is this?
Yeah.
Sorry. And is this what happens with? Is this what happens with fee bump transactions? Like in my example of, because we should just be consistent. So in my example where I create 3 fee bumps, any 2 of the 3 are okay. And I basically flood different pairs of them to different validators. They'll each forward like the first 2 that they got.
I mean, it's the same with fee bump. It's the same if you have like, if I submit 2 transactions with the same fee and same signum, right? They're basically competing on the overlay. And the second one is always like a bad sec, right? Like you always
and then you
number.
just have to fetch it from the denominator.
It's not that you fetch it. It's like whoever submitted that thing will have to resubmit it to the network.
No,
but
the second
time around.
What's going to happen is someone's going to nominate a block, and like a bunch of validators are going to be missing like one of the transactions in that block. So then they'll just all like have to manually go.
Well, the validators that had this other transaction in their queue, right? When the block is going to close, they're going to discard that transaction because it's actually at this point invalid. At this point in time, it's going to be likely invalid. And I'd say like depending on the condition, right? On your like if you say, for example, I need the transaction to be submitted, like 5 ledgers from now. Well, obviously it's invalid right now.
Right.
And one thing,
I guess my question is kind of independent of this particular example, right? We have this ability to like say create fee bump transactions and kind of spray out a bunch of mutually conflicting fee bump transactions. The result is that whatever block gets nominated is likely going to be missing. It's likely to have transactions that most of the validators don't have. And so, of course, they'll just fetch the pre-image of that transaction hash, but that, of course, has overhead on its own. But you're saying like
It's not how it
that's
works,
kind of
though.
okay.
Oh yeah. Like transaction sets are flooded independently of transactions today.
Right. So basically, like you end up nominating a transaction set. I see the hash of that transaction set in the nomination message, and then I turn around and like, I don't know what that transaction set is, and then I have
But
to
you're
ask you for
downloading all the
transaction.
transactions anyway.
Sorry.
So you download all the transactions anyway, even if you already have most of them.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
right, Nico? I mean, you're more expert on this, but I'm pretty sure that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the way it is right now.
Okay, well then that's easy. So I think the simple change is you don't prioritize one over. It's just first come first serve for forwarding.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's good.
Good. Cool.
Yeah, actually, that was what I was asking with my question number 3 in that section. Yeah, which is, so there's like in the second question inside this section on transaction forwarding and ordering, there was this. I was asking basically if we should do something about like bad properties, basically. So we have like with the current proposal, right, that we have for the payment channel, it's actually using separate transactions for DI and CI. CI is basically like one is the one that is allowing you to move the sequence number, and the other one allows you to, or uses the delay, right?
Right.
If you were going to create a smart contract where you're putting the condition and the jump in one transaction, you're going to have like those kind of delay attacks, right? You can delay those contracts pretty badly. So the question I had was, should we just not allow people? We can always, by the way, like leave that constraint later. But like for now, like if you make it that you can't have a min condition combined with like min sectum and min, you can't combine those the two, min sec and min age, basically.
Sorry.
Like you can't combine in the same transaction the jump and the age restriction.
What would that solve? I think I didn't.
We're in the two-way payment channel,
so imagine, right now, the protocol for payment channel doesn't have this problem because the two transactions, CI and DI, they actually have very different purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one allows you to jump in the sequence numbers, and the other allows you to delay, to have like those grace periods.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
Imagine if you, but imagine if you try to do like and I know we were actually looking at that at some point where it was actually the same transaction allows you to jump and has the condition, right? On the delay, right?
I'm not sure I understand.
So you're saying that you would make it so that people couldn't use min seek num and min seek age in the same transaction in order to,
because if you imagine that CI/DI somehow could be combined, which is what this is talking about. Like imagine you have a contract where you allow CI and DI to be combined, right? At that point,
I don't know what that means because DI is like declares that you're going to do something, and then CI actually does it.
Yeah, but the way you could do it, right? You could imagine having a CI/DI combined. Yeah, the two transactions on the same sequence number. You have one that is just the jump, and then you have another one that's, I don't know. Like it's a different protocol, right? Like I'm not talking about the existing payment channel. I'm talking about different protocols.
I think a protocol that might use this is where you have you have like, okay, you still have D and C. You declare something, and then you have this thing that can happen in the future. But then in the middle, maybe you have optional transactions that can be submitted. Like maybe that would be a use case for that. Like that last transaction, you want it to be submittable without a specific sequence number of the account. So maybe you want like 10 sequence numbers in between, and there are some other transactions that can be submitted before that. I don't know why you would do
that's
that.
Not, I don't think that's what I'm describing. I'm describing a transactions where you have both the open range, right, on sequence number and the delay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm describing. So you have that open range, so you can submit optional transactions between D and C. So C still has both. It needs to have the min sequence num so that it can be submitted whether those optional transactions be submitted or not.
But they would have the delay set. Yeah, I see. Yeah, you could do that. Basically, like you jump and then you have like, and you need to wait for a little bit to do those other transactions, but they're not going to be.
And if they don't happen,
closing.
Your final transaction can still be submitted after the delay.
Yeah. So my point here was that if you actually allow people to craft such transactions, those transactions can be attacked. Because you can, like the assumption with those things is that you can always like, you know, because I have the more recent version of that transaction, I can always submit it in a way. But here it's not the case anymore, and because I can submit those stale ones in the contract, right? And now you can basically, like, if S, like the grace period or whatever, is like fairly big, like as in, you know, like maybe more than a few minutes, and you have a lot of transactions that you're exchanging offline, you can basically submit all of them. All the ones that were until you actually expire the window.
So Nico, I'm confused. Can you
like imagine that I
clarify something? Is this is your objection that this is like too restrictive, that there's transactions that you want that you can't, that are illegal, or it's the other way around, that there's transactions that are bad? Okay. And so what specifically is the transaction that is bad?
So the transaction itself is not, so it's not that you have bad transactions, it's that they are, you have like in a payment channel kind of situation, right? You exchange a lot of those things offline. That's why you need to be able to jump forward, right? So that you have the latest transaction being processed. And what I'm saying here is that I think that if you were designing a smart contract that was combining the two constructs, it's actually a foot gun. Like it's likely wrong.
Which two constructs are we talking about?
The delay and jump.
Is the reason that you're saying this is a foot gun, like I'm trying to understand, just like David is as well. Like imagine that you have like the gap is like from sequence number 10 to 20, just to be super concrete. So you've got 11 slots, or let's make it 10 to 19. So you've got 10 slots. And then like the delay is 1 day, like the min seek gap, the min seek age is 1 day. I think what Nico is saying, but I could be wrong, is that you actually might incur a 10-day delay because somebody could play in each of the slots and then you go into the last one. Is that what you're saying, Nico, or is that not what
that's good. Yeah, like for the delay ones, that's exactly what will happen. You have also the other way around where you expect like you say, oh, this is only valid for the next 5 minutes, right? And now you can basically cause the thing to expire by replaying older ones. Like it's actually, those will not be, sorry, they would be those would be like ones with conditions that are going to be absolute.
I mean, yeah. Yes, of course I can give you a protocol where when I throw in time bounds or ledger bounds, like it doesn't work because those bounds aren't there. But like to say that that's a foot gun, it's like, well, just don't use that feature if you don't need it and it won't get in your way, right?
I just don't see, what I'm saying is that I don't see right now a use case where you would put both. I can only think of bad things if you put both.
So the argument is to disallow putting both.
Question. You're saying like, should we have a TX conditions V2 and a TX conditions V3 or something?
No. It doesn't need to be V1, V2. It's more like.
Sorry. Do we have a TX conditions like relative delay and a TX conditions like jump sequence gap or something? Like, should there be like two flavors of precondition that are mutually exclusive and that have subsets of these things rather than throwing them all into one TX giant TX conditions V2?
I mean, like, yeah, I don't. Like, yeah, maybe annoying.
I don't hate that if that's necessary to go in. I don't see a.
I guess I'm not. Yeah, I'm not maybe explaining very well. Like I know that when we were looking earlier at this protocol, some transactions had actually those two things, set. And if you're not careful, yeah, like you end up with a bad, like basically a broken contract. And it's part of like kind of giving the ecosystem like the least number of things that they can trip on those pre-signed transactions.
I don't object to that. If we want two flavors of TX conditions, I can do that. I can see there's some benefit in terms of like transactions take fewer bytes when serialized. There's some additional complexity that now you have to like, check the union.
Can we keep it as one structure and then just have core not allow those two fields to be set at the same time?
I was going to ask the same question.
I mean, that seems like the worst of all worlds because now we're adding like additional constraints that aren't expressed in the XDR. So like reading the XDR is not enough to know. Like you can make transactions that look valid because the XDR is valid, but it'll violate some rules. So that I don't like. Plus, you don't get the benefit of the more compact transactions. So I would suggest either keeping it this way or having two different kinds of TX conditions.
I think. Can we maybe take this offline? Like I feel like we're talking syntax at this point.
Right, but it's clear there are two choices, and there is like a design decision involved, right? One is like split it in two in order to protect users more, and two is keep it simpler, even though we are potentially leaving something in there that people could use in error.
Actually, I do have a potential use for this, which is that. Well, maybe this is not a very good one, but like you could worry about someone submitting a bunch of these transactions and like draining the fees from the account or something, and so maybe you want to make sure that the other person is only doing so many. But that's kind of bogus also because you could always just use a fee bump transaction to get the one that you want to execute through. So, all right, well. Again, I'm pretty agnostic on this.
So it's a binary choice, and it's pretty clear what it is. So I think moving it offline and just trying to find a way to just ultimately choose one or the other, that makes sense.
Okay.
The only other thing I'd add to this is like we should probably convince ourselves that like it actually is always a bad idea to do this. It probably is. I think Nico's point sounds right, but like I don't think any of the rest of us had actually considered that question. So we should probably take at least a few minutes offline to think about that.
Yeah. Perfect. Okay.
What else we got here? We got 6 minutes.
More questions. I'm sorry, I took over the meeting.
I think this is great because we're getting through these questions.
I'm getting concrete action items. So.
All right. So the next things are around transaction validation. So yeah, so those are like things that I think there's a section that talks about like I think dual validation, right, in the doc. That basically what happens basically during nomination, basically, and then what happens later, right, when you actually apply. I think this is what this is really about. So there's a thing that says all but the transaction with the lowest signum on a given source account must have 0 for the min-sec age and min-sec ledger gap fields. All right.
This is in a nominated block of transactions, right? In order for a block to be valid,
exactly.
right?
When you nominate something. Here, what I'm asking is like, should we simplify this to just be something more like the rule that we just discussed for flooding transactions? And basically, the rule is if you have a min-sec, thing condition on a transaction, you can never mix it with any other transaction in the same for the same source account. Like instead of having this weird, like, the lowest, I don't understand what we gain by having this extra kind of, like basically like the special cases where you can put 2 transactions.
Yeah, I mean, so you often might want to do that. Like you might want to bump a sequence number and then execute a bunch of things at that sequence number that are valid. But
what are you talking about? Yeah, but like it sounds like it's complicating things for no real good reason.
I agree with the fact that it's an implementation detail. Like we could not.
No, but this one is actually part of the. This one is part of the protocol. That's why this one is actually very important. Because
yeah, no. So the question
transaction
is,
set valid. If it has.
So. Yeah. So the question is like, do you have like, could you have like sort of various sequences of transactions, that you can execute with after some delay, right? And one reason you might want to do this is suppose for some reason you don't want to use claimable balances, or you're worried about something failing, right? You'd want to break a set of operations up into several different transactions in case like one of them fails, so the sequence number is consumed and you can execute the other ones, right? And so then if this kind of series of things you want to do has some relative delay, then what you do is like the first in the sequence would have like a min-seek age, and then the others you would just kind of like not, because you can only execute them at the right sequence numbers. So to me, this seems like something you'd want to do. It doesn't seem like a particularly hard thing to implement. I mean, you're already checking that all the sequence numbers are consecutive, or that they have min-seek nums that make sense. So just to sort of say that, like, other than the first one, the min-seek age also has to be 0, it doesn't seem like a big deal. But
I mean, it's more conditions, right? So I mean,
it's definitely useful, right? So the only reason to remove it would be if it's like really hard to implement.
Well, it's going to. You have to also do that in overlay, right? In the queues, like for all the queues that are being managed.
Well, they all are going to have.
You have to sort them. Yeah, they have to be sorted, and yeah, like you have.
But
to
we already
exactly
have to do that because we have to make sure all the sequence numbers today are consecutive.
Like
right?
It's more like now you have like certain conditions depending on the order, right? Whereas if you think of I think what we were talking about earlier is that, okay, if there's any transaction in the queue, I can't add the condition, for example. If I can't add that transaction, sorry.
Right, but that's the part we already talked about, that we're gonna, oh, sorry, what?
I'm not particularly offended by what you have, David, just to provide a counterpoint to Nico. Like I think there could be merit to pipelining, and I don't think compared to the already very large amount of condition checking that we do especially in the transaction queue, I don't think this would be a very material change. That's my opinion. If we think that this kind of pipelining situation is like not only possible but plausible, and I think it probably is, I don't think it's that bad personally.
At this point, we're also out of time. So
okay. So are you okay with that, Nico, or you're still not convinced?
No, it's probably fine. Yeah, it's just yeah, more conditions, like I said.
Okay. This one I do think is useful. So.
Okay, cool. So leave this one as is because it's useful and possible. Unless, obviously I think that what happens now is that we move this back to the mailing list. There are a few action items for you, David, to make changes to, and a few things that we still need to discuss async, but they're pretty simple, straightforward decisions to make. And then that also gives anyone time, if, Nico, if you think about this last point and decide that actually the utility may not warrant the extra work or something, that, there's time to sort of bring it up. But it feels like these are fairly discrete changes and action items that can actually get this thing in a position where we can evaluate a draft, possibly with an eye towards acceptance very soon. Does that seem true?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, awesome, everybody. Thanks again for being here. Thanks, everyone at home, for watching. And I'll see you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.